Okay.
Okay.
Warrior. In my opinion, the winner of the Endwalker changes so far.
Winner.
From relative to itself, relative to its Shadowbringer self, I think Warrior gets the most improved award. I think.
Okay.
I think.
Okay. We're not counting any. We're only counting tanks here, right?
Yes.
Bard, summoner,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
don't
yeah, yeah,
count.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Only counting tanks. I think
All right.
Warrior in the role category. I think Warrior, gets to come home and put the most improved award. I was the most improved in my class, Mom. How many people in your class? 4. Like I,
Four.
I think Warrior took the cake here. What I wanted, since you talked about in Gunbreaker, what you wanted. What I wanted was I said that I want more Fel Cleaves, just in
Sure.
general, more Fel Cleaves per minute, which they gave us. Not in the way I would have expected, but we got there. And
It's different.
and I wanted my inner release windows to feel like a frantic, angry bear had just been let loose. Just
I think we all
shredding
do.
instead of me like pressing Fel Cleave, which does feel good, but ultimately I'm just pressing Fel Cleave. Now, like, when you add in the multiple charges of onslaught, when you add in the upheaval and the new AoE upheaval and orogeny, and you add in nuclear Fel Cleave, primal rend, like it feels big. It also, because of the change, I think inner release, the charge system seemed to be universally across the board, but because
Yeah.
inner release is tied so much to the identity of Warrior, it felt particularly bad when you were learning a fight and you made a mistake and you popped inner release and then the boss like went into an intermission and talked for a while. And you were just like,
Which happens. Which definitely happens. Or the only buffs that go up on the boss are like Battle Litany and Chain Stratagem, right? And you're like, well, I'm already critting, but thanks.
right. And now there is a chance that the boss comes back in time, depending on what boss we're talking about, what transition we're talking about, what dungeon we're talking about, where it's like, hey, I pulled a pack. Oh, we killed the pack because somebody popped an LB in a dungeon and I never expect them to use LB in dungeons. Crap, it's gone, and I don't have more decimates going out. That's okay, just pull the next pack with
You
your
still
with
have your
your
buff.
insane gap cleavers, and then use your decimates. You're good. It felt awesome. Maintaining Storm's Eye. The worst feeling is going into a dungeon. Storm's Eye is so easy to keep up on a trial or a raid because you're on a single target. But in a dungeon, that opening pull doesn't feel good because you're like,
You have to take the 3 GCDs and maybe lose aggro on something. It's
so I've got to open with a weak AoE if I don't want to get ripped off of. And then I get to start doing real damage after my 3 GCDs. By then the pack's dead. And it's like, the whole first pack is like, okay, well, you guys get started. I'll join in on the next one.
I'll be there. We'll see you.
So moving Storm's Eye to Surging Tempest, I think, is the new name of the buff, but it's the same thing. They just changed the name because it's not tied to it can no longer be
Now
named after
people
the
won't be
ability because it comes from
confused.
two
If you're like, all right,
sources.
you need Storm's Eye up, and they're like, okay, I need to use a Storm's Eye combo to get Storm's Eye up.
You need Surging Tempest. It comes from your choice of hitting a 2-part AoE combo or a 3-part single target combo.
Yes.
It feels good. Like, it feels good. And it all feels very approachable. I still think it's the lowest skill ceiling tank. Am I wrong? Am I missing it?
I think Dark Knight might actually be pretty easy now.
Okay.
I think Dark Knight might be pretty. We'll have to see. But it feels like both of them are. You know what? Let's say it this way. I think both of them are going to be relatively approachable.
Okay.
I think both of them are going to be relatively approachable. And Paladin is going to be easier, but I would still say it's probably got a higher ceiling. Warrior definitely. So here's a question. So you wanted more inner release, more craziness. It would have been nice maybe if Fel Cleave just reset the cooldown of upheaval. Would have been great. You're just like boom, 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 boom. But it didn't. And now upheaval's no longer affected by inner release. Neither is onslaught because now it's just your 3 weapon skills, right? What did you think of that?
So, upheaval. I would have liked more upheavals per minute. I would have liked that being something that the cooldown was reset. Maybe like a bard proc rate. Like bards across the board just started just putting more straight shots everywhere. Like everything triggers straight shot now for bards. It's like everything has a 30. It's like every ability is the exact same except 35% chance to reset straight shot. Uh, and so
Now what? We have a third stack of onslaught, but you're really only charging 2 a minute, and you're using them a minute.
I would have liked more, but I think what I would have rather them be is still cost gauge
Sure.
and then tie them to the inner release window. So set the stacks at like 5. And so then leave, and like I was assuming that inner release was going to stay the same. And so that way it was literally an onslaught between every single Fel Cleave. Because what I'm picturing in my mind, fluff wise, is that inner release is me just releasing this like inner demon where I'm so angry that even if you turned and ran, you can't get away. It's Fel Cleave, chase you down. Fel Cleave, chase you down. Now, in reality, bosses aren't moving, but I want to just endlessly assault you. And even if you were running away from me, I want it to be Fel Cleave, gap close, Fel Cleave, gap close, Fel Cleave, gap close. Just all the way into your face. That's what I pictured from like a warrior with a, like, I don't have no freaking shield. I have a big axe, and what we have done is our axes are going to get bigger. Like this is going to be more reckless. Like an axe as a weapon, a big axe, like there is nothing defensive about that. Like it doesn't even have like the, like it's even hard to parry with. It's a reckless weapon to call a tank weapon, and that's what I wanted. Upheaval having recharge timers as well. I would have loved for inner release to feel like a Gunbreaker Gnashing Fang combo, where it is hard to weave abilities. Where it's like, if
you would think, because you think if you're going berserk, because that's what it's upgraded off of berserk, right? You think you're going so fast, you're uncontrollable,
right? Like ninjutsu.
But we have a little bit of control. We have a little bit of control.
I don't even want it to feel like a rhythm game anymore. I want inner release to be this like frantic thing, and then the rest of the time to be just me like wiping the sweat until the next inner release shows up. Literally like full 2.5 second globals with nothing in between.
Did you mess around on Reaper a little bit?
Reaper is like 3 separate jobs. You just do job 1,
but when
and
you
then
when
job
you
2,
summon your
and then
avatar,
job 3.
If inner release was like that, where you're just so fast, like a 1.5 second GCD, that would have been great.
And every ability upgrades at that point. And so like it does feel like you're this other, it literally feels like you're this other being, which is the fluff.
Sure.
And so it literally feels like Reaper feels like you're you have a pet. Oh wait, I think I might be my pet's pet. Like that's how it feels. Like I think he's telling me what to do now. And
that's so, exactly what it takes over your body.
And I want,
but
I wanted inner release to feel like that. I wanted inner release to feel like that. But I think this is a pretty close second. I think getting Orogeny to make Upheaval feel like something I just use all the time. Just every 30 seconds, you just gotta be just. Ugh. But now it doesn't make me feel as frantically angry. It makes me feel a little bit spastic, but I'm kind of okay with it. But it does make me feel like I'm just like, like just every 30 seconds, I'm just casting this thing that I associate with Gage.
Why not?
And I'm just,
why not?
It's just like, oh, here's an extra hit. But what's crazy about this is that like Warrior feels like that spastic guy that you go to fight him, and then he like slams his head into like a light pole and he's bleeding, and he's like, okay, now I'm ready. Like, because the amount of like self-heal on here, you're like, the Warrior's like, hey, can you hurry up and hurt me? Because like there's self-heal here. There's like, it feels like this job wants to get hit.
Self-heal. Why don't we talk about equilibrium for a second?
It feels
that
like
got a nice buff.
I want to get hit. Like when I'm at full health on a warrior, I'm like, well, this is kind of a waste. Like,
yeah, you want to be main tanking, right? So you can use your kit. Other people want to be main tanking too, but you're like, no, I need this. You don't understand. This is a primal need. This is an urge.
They're like, I can mitigate. Let me tank. I can avoid the damage. Like, I don't want to avoid the damage. I need to hurt.
You don't understand. I have a heal that also heals me over time right now. I need this. More than ever.
So, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm really excited. Like, shake it off, adding a heal. It's like, no, everybody needs to get hurt. We're all gonna bleed together. Yeah, like, this is gonna be awesome. It just feels like a mosh pit of a tank, and I think that's what I wanted it to be. As the tank that said my materia melds don't work with everybody else's because I'm a weirdo. I wanted the rotation to feel. If I'm going to have to be ostracized, if I'm going to have to sub-optimize my gear, then I want my job to feel like it embraced that. And I actually didn't want it to come in line with everybody else. My biggest fear for Endwalker was they were like, you know what, we fixed Warrior, we brought it in line with the other 3 tanks. No, I like that it's an island. I think that's why I'm a fan of... I like that it's the odd one out. I think that's why I like Warrior, is because it's the odd man out. And it feels like it just embraced...
It was also just really strong for so long.
It just feels like it embraced it. It feels like it said, hey, Warrior feels like the job that, in my opinion... Casters struggle with this a little bit too. It feels like the job, in my opinion, that is advocating for materia to move to being on the job stones, not the gear.
Like if you could just like a glamour plate, but for materia for your gear. If you're just like, all right, Warrior's getting this materia.
Yep.
I would spend the extra materia to do that. Crafted gear would suck.
I mean,
that's not too bad. But it would change.
The game is not designed for crafted gear. The vast majority of the population is never going to interact with the word pentameld.
No, but it affects the market board a lot. So you can't really do things per job because that would put so much into disarray.
If we cared about the market board, we wouldn't make materia easier and easier and easier to acquire, easier and easier and easier to meld and retrieve and extract. We've introduced more and more ways to get materia, and yet by removing belts, we're actually slowly removing uses for materia. So we are now going to use less materia than ever before. And yet we have continually added more materia than ever before. So I don't think the market board is their focus. I'm not saying it should be, but I am saying like this game is not a good economic simulator. Whether or not it should be, it's not. So
that's true. That's true. Some people make a lot more than others too.
So I think that gear in general is mostly stat sticks. Because we can swap the glamours out anyway. So I think it's mostly stat sticks. So I think that Warrior is the job that feels like to me is one of the jobs that most calls out and says, I don't want you to fix how I use materia. I want you to fix how materia uses me. I want materia to adjust. I want materia. And I will say that the relic system this time around, for example, felt really good. Like adjusting your stats on a relics feels good. And it feels like you can really... So maybe that's... I think jobstones and weapons should absorb your materia.
The only downside is that they didn't allow direct hit for the other tanks or the healers, considering it's a stat that they are able to put on their other weapons. But I can understand it.
Okay. That's fair. So
Warrior, though? Very good.
Yes. Bloodwetting.
Well, you mentioned Shake It Off real quick. I wanted to double check something. You said it added a heal.
Did it not?
That does not happen after 80. That happens at 76.
76 happens right now.
Which
Congratulations.
means that T is going to have it.
November 19th, you get Shake It Off with a heal. So, like, Endwalker adds it, and it is effective immediately.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to help. Like, wish we could have it now while we're doing our all tanks in Shiva, because we're running 6 warriors.
Nation Flash just works a little bit different. I think it became more useful. Not that it wasn't, I mean, it was already good, but...
Nascent and Bloodwetting are essentially the same thing, just one on you, one on another. Right? I believe.
So, yeah, Bloodwetting upgraded Raw Intuition starting at 82, and it grants Nation Flashes,
from 20 to 10.
And Stem the Flow goes on both. And so it brought them more into being opposite sides of the same coin.
Right.
They kind of met in the middle. And I actually had it in my notes that Stem the Tide Nation will be good in T. Even a casual like me had that in here. It says T right here.
You're
like, look at this guy.
We said in T, Stem the Tide is something we get immediately, or is that 82 now? It is 82. So we won't be able to use it in T, but we will be able to use it in Dragon's
Stem
Song.
the Tide will be 82 instead of 76.
And enhanced Nascent Flash is 82 as well.
Okay, yes. Stem the Tide is until 82 instead of at 76.
The Shake It Off buff is good.
The Shake It Off.
So
there it is. That's what my
good.
total... It says Shake It Off at 76, and then Nation Flash added at 82 instead of at 76 for people using this in T. That's the exact phrase I wrote in my notes.
And Nascent has a wall of text just like Heart of Corundum. It does a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah.
I think the most curious thing is the healing change to Nascent. It doesn't care if we Fel Cleave now, or Tomahawk, or whatever. Before it was a healing percentage based on the damage you dealt, and now it's just 400 potency flat, which is fantastic.
One of them was based on you. Is it not based on doing something? It's just a flat.
Not anymore. It's a flat weapon
Okay.
skill for the duration. So it's as if you used Storm's Eye for each of the hits in
Okay.
terms of potency,
So you have to
which is
keep
good.
doing stuff, but it doesn't
Yeah,
matter what
yeah,
you're doing. As long as you're
right,
playing,
right.
just keep
Which is
playing.
great because before you're like, oh, can you nascent me? I don't really have a Fel Cleave ready yet. You're gonna have to wait, right? But the fight doesn't always like that. Sometimes the fight's gonna put a tank buster on you, and you don't have the gauge to power heal somebody. So now you're just going to use weapon skills. But it is weapon skills. Your onslaught's not going to heal them. Your upheaval's not going to heal them.
I think
Which is
that
fine.
feels like the sort of change that the game. One of my frustrations with the state of the game right now is that we're so anti damage meter, we're so anti third party tools, but in lieu of that, Stone Sky Sea Air is a really weak tool. The role quests are a really weak teaching tool, and so for people that are already on the other side and already know how to play the game of Savage, like, oh, I'm already here, and it's not that hard. Like, I swam across the channel, and it wasn't as heavy of a current as you thought. Great, that's great that you, with hindsight, feel comfortable about the journey you made, but there are still people standing on this side of the channel going, I can't swim across that, and they're intimidated. And so I think the game needs to do a better job of reaching out a hand and saying, that's fine. Let's just get you started with swimming just a portion of it, and then you can stop there if you want to. That way there will be people who stop there, but there will also be people who say, that wasn't so bad. Let me swim another section. And so I think saying just use weapon skills is a good example of, like, across the board. I haven't known how to put my finger on it, but it does feel like the game is starting to say, just use all your globals. I don't care what you use them on. Just use all your globals.
It's almost like it's passively teaching you to have your own thoughts. Like, I should be pressing this button. And it's teaching you to do that on your own now, right? It's like encouraging you to just be a little bit self-thinking in terms of, like, sometimes people will be, I don't feel like I'm not doing as much damage as them. And you're like, well, you're not really pushing your buttons. I am. And you look and their GCD goes like this. And you're like, well, there was that time where you didn't press anything. Oh, right. And now they're encouraged, just always be doing that. You do this, you do damage. You do this, you get a heal. You do this, you reduce damage. You're just going to keep doing that over and over.
And a lot of the new abilities, right? Like you mentioned Dragoon earlier. A lot of the new abilities, or Reaper, you mentioned Reaper, you only really get to see the shiny new stuff, especially if you want to see it more than once per fight. You really only get to see it if you're pushing your buttons correctly. A lot of this stuff is tied behind combos. Some of the melee stuff is tied behind, like, you really need to be doing your positionals. You need to be using all of your abilities. And so I think tying a lot of this stuff behind traits and making these kind of upgradable sets of abilities says, if you want to see the last ability on the paladin thing, then you really need to be pushing it every single time. You don't get to see the biggest sword unless you finish the combo. And so I think, in general, what you're talking about is, as we're talking about the last tank here, is we've just talked about 4 tanks in a row, and I feel like the game is offering more reward to people that are on the journey to get better. Now, people who are up where you're at, they're going to get to take advantage of those rewards from day one, so the expansion is going to feel amazing. But that would have happened regardless. The difference is that we're adding something for the new players, and we didn't have to do it at the cost to you. You got what you should have gotten, and now
that's the number one thing I was going to say.
Also,
because how does a developer tackle something by, they publicly stated we want the game to be accessible by everybody, and that's great, right? And you'll have like the top 1% who are like, but we want more, we want harder, and that's not always reasonable, because the majority of players that don't want that are probably, this is going to sound a little weird, but they're a little bit more valuable at the end of the day to a company than a select few that want something to be a certain way. And Square did an amazing job of meeting both fields in this situation. They gave us something that's going to feel good, and they gave new players something that's going to make them feel great. And nobody feels bad. And I think that, I can't imagine the level of stress and the journey it took them through COVID to get to this point where they're making everybody happy. Or at least it looks like they're going to make everybody happy. I can't see how anyone loses in this situation.
So I know that when this video goes live, that Brian has already sat down and had a 4-part conversation with Larry about casters and I believe healers. I haven't seen it, but it should be over on Ginger Prime. And they set out to film 1 video, and they accidentally filmed 4. And because they were so excited about the magical side of things. And you and I have just sat here, and I said, do you have time to talk about some tanks? And we have just had 4 full-length videos gushing about tanks. And I am on the totally opposite end of the player skill level than you are. And for us to both be excited does feel like maybe you and I are a little overhyped about something. Maybe there is some negative side, but not without positive. There is no way we are this positive and there's not any positive. There is something here. There's something in the water. There's something worth being excited about. And maybe our finger's a little off the pulse of what that thing is, and we'll find out on November 19th because some of these numbers will shift. We did not get to try a lot of like level 90 content.
Nope.
And so we're missing how this feels in trials. We're missing how this feels in raids. Of course, how this is going to feel in savages.
I did get to take down multiple A ranks, which are challenging when all we were given was the base equipment.
Yeah.
And we spent like a half an hour on one of them. We were wiping. It hit hard.
It took 7 of you half an hour, and so we went to pull one, and they told us that. They said there was a group that took 7, and I was watching y'all's chat that day, and so I was like, no, I know who was in that group, and we did it with 6.
The big thing about that was we
don't count how many deaths we had.
No, never. I had to pull up a separate battle log because it was all in Japanese for that boss, so I couldn't read because there was a tell for in and out, and I had to pull up a battle log and just as soon as I recognized which one was which, I just made a copy paste macro with like this out, and just shout chatted it every time it happened to help try to guide everybody to victory and get through it. And we eventually did it, but I can say. Now, first off, I messed up my combo.
So there's a group between yours and mine that also did it, and they had Jahara with them who can read Japanese. So I will say, of the 3 groups that tackled that rank that I heard of, the advantage is somebody's got to know Japanese. Because that was just a dev build. There was the abilities didn't get translated. So that was just a weird quirk.
No. And they were nice enough to try to translate them live while we were pulling, and it was exciting to watch too because we were using our valuable time that we could be testing jobs to just have fun, and that was awesome. Just getting to have fun with other creators that were there. It was really cool.
Yeah, they asked us. They said, "Do you need us to get somebody in here and translate it?" I was like, "No, we're gonna figure it out." And I just started trying to pay attention to characters, and we were calling. Yep. I was like, "All right, everybody out."
But what I'm getting at in that terms is I actually did try a couple of different tanks between the pulls because we wiped.
Yeah, people were switching jobs.
And they felt great. It was awesome. I'm really excited. And maybe it's just the love and passion we have for the game that we're both, having a middle ground here where it's like, the top end of players and the bottom end of players and everywhere in between, everybody was happy. Everybody I talked to was happy. And I'm not going to claim to be the best. And I know you're not the worst. We're somewhere in the middle because we're all just players playing the game at the end of the day, right? And maybe we're thinking about the content in different ways. Maybe I'm like analyzing things more than I need to in my head about mechanics and potencies and everything. And it's all subject to change. All subject to significant change by the release.
And you and I are biased because we're both passionate about this to the game to the point where it has moved us to where we're literally full-time content creators who play multiple games but focus on this one. Yes. And I never dreamed of this being my career choice. I got here because I love doing this, and I think you're in the same spot. And so I will say it is possible that there are other viewpoints. There were other people at the media tour to represent those viewpoints who are newer to the game or only casually play the game or are press and literally only cover the game. And so there will be other viewpoints that maybe say, yeah, it looks fine. There's other good games too. But
it's also possible the other roles didn't get treated as nicely as tanks. But I had fun.
I played every job, and every single job felt better than how I feel about that job in Shadowbringers from my point of view. Yep. Compared only to itself. Now, when you compare those jobs to the rest,
no problem maining more than half of them.
But when you compare those jobs to the rest of the roles, there are going to be jobs that while they say, "Hey, I improved," they go to get into their static, and their static says, is that what you want to bring? Would
So
you
you'll say maybe not. Another like, you sure you don't want to play red mage?
would you
Like,
consider something else? Every job will be welcome because this is an incredibly balanced
Sure.
game. To anybody that says there's a job that's not welcome, that tells me that this is probably the only MMO you've played, because you haven't played an MMO where there are just literal trash jobs. 14 has never had those. 14, every job is viable, but there are jobs that have advantages because otherwise they'd have to be homogenized to the point where they're all identical.